rate will be raised to 99%, covering basically all the children aging from 0 to 3. What is the age of 0? Aging from 0 to 3 years old. When the target is set as, the gross entrance rate to be raised to 99%, that means we are not far from it. Actually, in 2009, it's roughly about 50%. That means only 50% of the children aging from 0 to 3
go to nursery school.
Go to nursery schools.
Right.
Do you feel that? You've been here in China for a long time. Do you feel that problem?
Yeah, I think it's partly economics, because a lot of the private nursery schools can be very expensive. It's been a long time since I was at that age of parenting. Our daughter's 13 now, so I'm long past that.
Did she go to a normal public kindergarten nursery, or did she just go to a private international one?
She went to an international one.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was pretty expensive then. Of course, she spent part of the time in the U.S. as well, but she was here part of the time going to the international one. And it was not something, I think all the kindergartens were expensive, but especially the bilingual ones, were just out of sight. So I think, but even just an ordinary private kindergarten is pretty expensive. You have a lot of Chinese parents willing to spend that money, but I think the average people is a little bit beyond their reach if it's not a public kindergarten.
Yeah.
So when they say the goal is to get 99% enrolled, they want 99% of the children between 0 and 3 to be going to these nursery schools. Is that?
Yeah, as I understand it.
That's impressive. I certainly don't think we've got that in the States, because public education doesn't start until kindergarten. So,
that's right. In fact, I've never quite been sure what the concept of nursery school is exactly, because we have kindergarten, which is it's fairly clear. What is nursery school exactly? And in Chinese, do we say Torso?
Torso, I guess, is the Chinese equivalent of nursery school.
But is there some kind of a standard education or legal definition of that kind of school? I don't even know. Yeah.
But 0 to 3.
But if you say the parents can tolerate the fact that their children are not going to the nursery schools, that obviously they cannot tolerate that if it happens to the kindergarten period, because they want their children to be enrolled in these kindergartens. But so far, we've only got, say, in Beijing, we've only had like 1,266 kindergartens. These are officially registered, and there are also over 1,000 kindergartens which are not officially registered. But again, if we combine the two groups, these kindergartens are still not enough to meet the demands of all these children. It might be aging from 3 to 6 before they go to a primary school. And sometimes these parents, they have no choice. They have to go to these private kindergartens, because all these public kindergartens are, it's very difficult for them to apply for a position. The story that I've heard about, it's just one case saying, it's not long after the baby was born, and the grandma or their parents, they went to a nearby kindergarten saying, can I get registered here? I would like to have a position reserved for my child when he grows up. And they say, well, it's still too early. Why don't you just wait for a few more years, and then we'll have him registered. And maybe after a few years, they went back again. Can I register now? Why don't you come early? It's just too late. You would see, all these kindergartens, they're very much sold out. It seems, you have to wait long before the due date. And,
Well, we know in Japan, they're crazy about it. They have these waiting lines for these privileged, special, highly academic kindergartens, and then yet another one for the primary school, and another one. They sometimes put themselves in line, for 5 and 6, 10 years ahead of time. I don't think we're that way in China yet. I haven't heard of anything like that. But there's certainly these very high-level kindergarten. There are a lot of Montessori schools, right, for young kids that are getting very popular these days.
What do you consider a good kindergarten?
I would say a good kindergarten is one that fosters kids' creativity and gives them a lot of opportunity to do different types of things, different kinds of activities, exposes them to different kinds of problem solving, because even at 3, you know, you can have very young children solve problems. But you have to give them the opportunity to do that, and you need some not necessarily special toys, but things that are at their level to do. I'll never forget, I was spending some time with a friend of mine who had at the time her son was about 8 months old, 8, 9 months old, and he had just started eating solid food and was learning how to open the bottle that held his cookies. And I went to help him, and she said, no, give him the bottle. He'll figure it out. He wants the cookies. He'll figure it out.
But would you expect all these babies in these kindergartens to learn some characters or to know how to write certain characters?
I wouldn't.
But
knowing China, it wouldn't surprise me if they did, though.
No, but actually, that does bring, and I'd be interested to see what you think about it, because there's a lot of controversy about the teaching of English and how early you start.
Yeah.
And I was just talking today to some friends, you know, who are you know, putting their kids in a kindergarten, and they really want this bilingual, you know, anything that says bilingual on it, they go for it, because
no
they
matter
want
how good or how bad that
no
is.
matter how good and bad, and no matter whether there's any educational theory that says it's better for kids to learn as a second language. Obviously, if they're in an environment where there's both languages being spoken by native speakers, it's not an issue. But the question is, at what age do you want to start actually like explicitly trying to teach them English? What do you think about that? Do you think the younger the better, or it doesn't matter, or are parents too concerned about this aspect of teaching their children English?
I think we're finding out that, you know, obviously the earlier you start, maybe the easier it seems. But what you also find, even in kids who come from bilingual homes, so, you know, the mother speaks, say, for example, Chinese, the dad speaks English, something like that, is that their vocabulary in any one of the 2 languages is half of what it would be if they were only learning one, approximately.
So basically, the capacity is there, either as you fill it with Chinese or in English.
Exactly. and initially, when the child's starting to speak, you see that sort of division. And as time goes, obviously, it evens out, and they can speak both. But really, what we see is a division in brain activity depending on when you learn it. And if you learn it early, there are 2 language centers in our brain, and if you learn it very early, both centers are activated similarly regardless of the language. If you learn it later, it's divided in one area and not in the other. And then if you learn it even later in your teens, you see it divided.
You know, one of the private kindergartens, which is very much sought after and is seen as the best, one of the best, because they promise that when your child graduates, they say graduates from that kindergarten, they will make sure that your children will be able to know over 2,000 Chinese characters at the age of 6. And they will know about 400 English words. And it is extremely important for some Chinese parents, because they are not only thinking about the kindergarten days, they're thinking far beyond that. It's about their primary education, which it really depends, it really determines sometimes actually which primary school you're going, because once again, you know, the pressure, the academic pressure is always there. I'm sure you have that feeling, because you grew up here. The academic pressure for all the Chinese students is ever starting. It used to be about the high schools, you know, before you face the entrance examination, but it goes down to the senior high and then to the primary school, and these days it seems, you know, it's connected to the kindergartens already.
Yeah, this cannot be good. I mean, the pressure to be super kids and to start, you know, before when they're out of the womb practically.
That's why we have H0.
Exactly.
Plan. But we know it's no good. All the parents, lots of parents say it's no good, but it seems you have no choice at all. Just for your information, if you're talking about a famous, really famous kindergarten in Beijing, for each month you have to pay roughly over 1,000 yuan plus 15,000 donation.
Yes.
A donation of 15,000 plus 30,000 donation to an education fund. But they do promise when you leave this kindergarten, you can get the education fund refunded, but I guess you won't leave. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. We're talking about education in Beijing.
條金裝，兩條特長啊，俾多兩條薄荷添啊。係咪15分鐘後喺公園攞啊？
Buying and selling illicit cigarettes, it's illegal. The maximum penalty is a $1 million fine and 2 years imprisonment.
Welcome back to Crossover. We'll continue our discussion about education issues in Beijing, and this is basically triggered by a new document released by the local government in Beijing. They're setting the targets, education targets for 2010. Now, the second area, which is also catching quite a lot of attention, is according to this outlook, they're promising they will be building up a supervision system, especially about the workloads of primary and secondary school students. So in other words, it's just too much academic pressure or all kinds of pressure for all these students, especially in middle schools. Mm-hmm. And what is your feeling? And your daughter is now in.
My daughter's, but she's in a Chinese middle school, but so it's the international section of a Chinese middle school.
Okay, that might ease that workload a little bit, but how heavy is her bag?
Well, I think it eases it a lot. She's not getting, at least according to how much she actually spends. We hear these horror stories, and I've seen them. You know, Chinese kids get home after their extracurricular activities at 5:30, 6, 7 or something, scarf down a quick meal or something, and they do homework for 4 or 5 hours before they go to bed. And unfortunately for a lot of kids, that's exactly the case, especially as you get closer to high school level and get ready for the college entrance exam. But also for young kids as well, even junior high.
Things were also like that when you were in the middle school in here?
When I was in middle school, yeah, it was like that. And I remember the last 2 years of high school, I didn't get too much sleep.
But you were not about to face that entrance examination at the time in China. You were going back anyway to the States for university education.
That's true, but I wasn't 100% sure of that at the time.
Right.
I hadn't, we hadn't made that decision. My Chinese was good enough to go for the entrance exams. And I considered going to Chinese university very seriously before I ended up going back to the States.
So it's virtually the same thing years ago, like what's happening today, all these students working so hard.
I think what's happened now is it's starting earlier and earlier. I don't know that it necessarily started quite that early when I was in, say, middle school.
So in junior high, it was relatively easy life.
I don't know, I would say easy, but it was easier than what kids are dealing with today, definitely.
Right. Let's just, some information about the weight of the bags of these, say, pupils or middle school students. It's roughly about 4 kilograms, and it's all textbooks in there, all these materials they're handed out by their teachers every day, and they have so much to work on for their homework, and then they have to carry all these textbooks with them. And you'll see, it's actually wheeled. It's a great invention.
Yeah, you see outside of the Chinese elementary schools, at the end of the school day, you see all these people. Very often it's grandma and grandpa too, and not mom and dad. But you see them waiting for the child, and the child comes out with it, and the first thing they do is go over and grab the backpack out of the, that's the scene of these grandmas and grandpas carrying the backpack for the kids.
I think the wheelie ones are fantastic. That's brilliant. I wish we had that when I was going to school.
That is also why you see more parents would drive their children to the school and try to take them back to the school, because either as students working in this hustle and bustle in all these busy streets, and at the same time the bags are just too heavy for them. And the burden is not only from the school studies, actually, all these parents, once again, they're encouraging their children to take more than that. And for the weekends, it's virtually they don't have any weekends at all. Yeah. What about your daughter?
Yeah.
Does she have a weekend?
She has too much of a weekend. I'm not a tiger father, by the way, but I mean,
Right.
I mean, she does. I mean, she has much more than an American child would have at the similar age, definitely. And I went through the American school system, and for me, it was like homework. It's something you do on the school bus on the way home. 15 minutes, and you go and watch TV. She puts in several hours each night, basically, with a tutor, and even on the weekends sometimes. So she has it worse than the American kids. But you know, we talked about the tiger mom phenomenon, you know, and everything.
Yeah.
It came out then that a lot of Chinese parents are looking at this situation, and teachers too, and educational experts, and saying, you know, that this is maybe not the best way to raise these children in their formative years. That we need to give them time to play. And you mentioned creativity. Give them time to think, to play, to develop social skills, quite frankly, because a lot of them just really almost have no time to even go out to, you know, to a party with their friends or something like that in the middle.
And for all these middle school students, they're not only focusing on these studies, and it's basically they have to learn piano, either one
piano, violin, or something.
musical instrument,
dancing.
Dance, yeah.
They have to take in extra classes. Either the tutors will be invited to their homes, or they have to go to their tutor's place. And sometimes they have to, you know, if they're good enough, they have to attend the international kind of competition, academic competitions, like for maths or for physics. And everything they do at the time is a part of the preparation for a good either senior high school, because that is a part of the preparation, you know, that prepares you better for the entrance examination. So again, this is part of that chain, the chain of power going from the university down to the senior high, down to the middle school, and to the primary school, as we said, even to the kindergarten. And as part of the you know, solutions to solve the problem, there is the imbalance of school resources, and the government says, okay, let's do it this way. We'll not give you the chance to choose which school you're going, because you know there might be an imbalance. But why don't we say do it according to where you live? If you live in this place, you go to a middle school nearby. That means you don't have to push your children that hard, because it's already been decided. But have you heard about that story?
Well, that's the way it is in the States, I think. You know, you can tell one of the things that determines how much a house costs in a lot of areas is the school district that it's in.
Right, that's true.
Because our public school system is determined by where you live. And so if a few years ago, some friends of mine were looking around at houses, and there was a huge price difference in one area, and it's because that was the area where the good school was.
So that's the same thing.
You're talking about a completely legal thing.
Yeah.
I think you're implying that they sometimes try to stretch the rules or something like that.
Well, legal or illegal, sometimes if you buy a property, you can move your residence from the original place to the new place. But sometimes it really depends, because that can also be used as the part of the promotion campaign of these new houses. When they try to sell you that house, say, this is connected to that middle school. We'll take a short break, and we'll continue our discussion about education in Beijing. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Crossover. We'll continue our discussion about education as triggered by a new document released by the local government in Beijing. Well, when we say it's education in Beijing, but it's not only about Beijing, it's virtually the same picture everywhere, at least about all these cities in China. So we'll move on to the next point. This is mainly about the children of the migrant workers, because you see a huge population of migrant workers, not only in Beijing, but virtually anywhere in China, in all these big cities. And the education is always a big problem, especially with the children of these migrant workers, because we have this residence registry issue. You are registered to a certain place, and according to the original law,
residence permit, the hukou.
Okay, that means you have to take education in there, because the compulsory education law says your resources has been allocated to that region. So it is an issue for all these children of these migrant workers. And according to this new policy, says they are going to depend on these public schools to perfect the system, the protection system for the education of the migrant workers' children for the period of compulsory education. Compulsory education means the first 9 years, because China has a 9-year compulsory education system.
And some of these, I mean, migrant workers are coming from other places and living in the cities, in Beijing or other cities. But some of these children have essentially,
they were born
here, they grew up here. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they are from Beijing or whatever big city, their parents are migrant workers. To some extent,
you are
Yes, I'm the child of migrant workers.
Right, from the United States.
Yeah.
There's a big problem overall with the hukou, with the residence permit, and there's talk always of abandoning it or changing it or canceling it, but they can't do that. But this is a good example of a measure they can take to kind of fix this problem without abandoning the hukou, because it used to be that there were hundreds of thousands of migrant kids here in Beijing and other big cities that needed schooling, and the problem has been that the number of schools that spring up, and usually with private money or with funding of some kind, vary all the way from very responsible, accredited schools with good teachers to absolutely fly-by-night, frankly fraudulent schools that just are little babysitting places with horrible conditions, and that they're gone the next week, and the kids don't really get an education. So the Beijing, at least I know something about Beijing, has been very good at getting rid of some of those substandard schools and about standardizing some of the others, making standards for them, and also trying to create programs that interlink the migrant schools with the local Beijing public schools. It's even called under the same Blue Sky initiative or something like that, where they actually try to have sister schools where the migrant kids can go visit the Beijing residents, so that they learn to assimilate a little bit better. The ones that they're from outside, they maybe speak with different dialects, or they come from much poorer families, and so on and so forth. So there's these sorts of things. And the next step is the one that sounds like they're contemplating, which is the logical thing to do, the humane thing to do really, is to change the hukou system so that they're able to, under some conditions, whatever those might be, registration conditions or monetary conditions, to go to the same Beijing public schools. The same thing we have in the US with illegal immigrants. Do they get to go to school or not? I think the ultimate solution in that case, in the US situation, in this case, is you just have to have them all going to the same school so they're standardized. Otherwise, you get this apartheid situation where these poor kids are getting a terrible education, and they remain aliens in their own city.
True. Yeah. That's true. I mean, so far the government, it seems the government and also the charity organizations are doing a lot, actually.
Yeah.
They've been working very hard to solve that problem. That the focal point actually these days remains on whether they would be entitled to take the entrance exams in here, in where they live, where they studied. Because according to the original policy, you have to go back to your original hometown to take the entrance examinations. But the problem is, if you've been educated in one place, either there is the consistency problem of textbooks, or there might be the problem with how good the quality is, the education quality is. I mean, there might be an advantage or disadvantage when you go back to that place. And the competition for a university tend to be more fierce in other places.
It's allocated, right? The Chinese university system. I'm not super familiar with how they decide who gets to go to what university. I know you do the Gaokao, the entrance exams, and you have to have a certain number of points. But I think the number of points you have is dependent on the area you come from.
Well,
is that
just
right?
to make, I guess it is designed to ensure the balance of development. That's why quotas have been given to different places. Say this university they have the plan to enroll 1,000 students. Maybe 10 will be given, or 100 will be, say, allocated to Beijing. Another 100 will be allocated to Guangdong. and this will be divided into different groups of according to their, say, different subjects, and you have to apply to within your own province. But the thing is, you either you face different population bases. Second, you're facing, different education systems, and the exams you take might be different from what you've learned in this place.
So it seems like the solution is to either standardize the educational system more rigorously, including the exams, or abolish the requirement that they have to take the college entrance exam in their own home province. It's one or the other, it seems like.
These days, actually, the new development is all these universities, some of the universities are allowed to enroll their own students. They don't have to. I mean, it's still in conjunction with the Unified National Entrance Examination, but...
Well, the recent controversy was this university in Xiamen, where they actually are trying to not only develop their own students, but to be totally independent of the Chinese...
From the national
system, so that they're able to have their own standards, their own curriculum, and so on and so forth. And it's been interesting to see what happens there, because if they succeed with that model and the government allows them to do it, the problem now is people are saying, well, what happens if they graduate this diploma?
Coming up, Inside Story.